People are dumb, like really dumb. Like our monkey brains will believe anything, and I mean anything. Flat earthers exist, anti-vaxxers exist, even Jar Jar fans exist. It's our nature to believe things, specifically stupid things, and video games are not exempt from these blizzards of lies. So naturally, there are some widely held beliefs about video games that are wrong. So I'm gonna talk about them. Before I started writing this script, I asked my friends if they knew any video game myths. And I'm never making that mistake again. So, I did what I should have done in the first place and turned to my only real friend, the internet. And in my best Mythbusters cosplay, I searched far and wide on the first page of a Google search and looked for some myths about video games for me to dismantle. Now, normally in a Mythbusters episode, they would tell you, don't do this at home, it's dangerous, but all I did was research, and doing that on your own is fine, as long as it doesn't contradict anything I say. Myth number 1. Video games cause kids to be more violent. Now, I want to be perfectly clear. I am nowhere near the best person to be making this argument. My friends and I have said plenty of violent things. We've even said some on this channel. Oh, look, a dead body. This will be good for triggering traps. Friendship formed over murder is still friendship. So there's a puppo. We have two options here. I kill him and I don't kill him. They're two.
Kill the enemies.
We still got hella cash because we murdered that man. I assure you, everything we said in that montage isn't because of video games. It's because we're bad people. In fact, if you look at the statistics... No, wait, don't click off. Don't click off. Okay, good. If you look at the statistics, video games don't seem to cause violence in youth. In fact, while video game sales are on the rise, juvenile crime rates have been going down since 2006, and violent juvenile crime is at a record low. Meanwhile, meme-based crimes are on the rise. There are people who will try to make the link between violent video games and mass shootings. The reality is that an average school shooter played less violent video games than the average kid. This source, like all of my sources, are in a document that I link below, but if you're wondering, the source on that was the Secret Service, so unlike the theory that birds are government drones, there's absolutely no proof that video games cause school shootings. It is true that there are some studies that claim violent video games lead to a temporary rise in aggression, but those studies are really weak and tend to not really hold any water. And there are others who try to use a school shooter playing a dancing game as proof that video games cause violence. But doing that is like me saying I'm the best YouTuber because I'm failing school. There's no connection between the two. Video games aren't the thing that's behind these violent crimes and tragedies. They are caused by systemic issues that people are too scared to talk about. Video games aren't the first scapegoats that people blame the violence on, and they won't be the last. In the 1950s, comic books were blamed for violence, and they were burned like they were a clown that robbed a Quickie Mart. According to people who were wrong, comics caused violence. The result of all this panic was the Comics Code Authority, an organization hell-bent to take the fun out of comics. In fact, the Comics Code is the reason that comic books are dominated by superheroes. Before the Comics Code, there were popular horror, crime, nonfiction, and even romance comic books, because nothing is more romantic than a comic book. Without the Comics Code, we could have had a nonfiction version of the MCU. But no, the Comics Code Authority used their power over the distributors to only sell those with their approval, so there couldn't be violent or sexual content. So there goes all the fun parts of nonfiction. Crimes couldn't be portrayed in a way to make the reader sympathetic to the criminal, so boom, the entire crime genre gone. Comics couldn't have the words horror or terror in its title, so boom, there goes the entire horror genre. And any openly gay character just couldn't exist. However, the superhero genre could follow all these rules. The criminals weren't ever right, they were all evil, there was a clear hero who worked with law enforcement. In fact, the no killing rule some heroes used to have, that came from the comics code. Heroes and villains alike couldn't kill people. Some more of these stupid rules were that the good guys always had to win, you couldn't show werewolfism, you just weren't allowed to. No real reason, no proof or evidence that that would do anything, you just couldn't. Now, my point in talking about the comics code is not because it's so weird. Don't get me wrong, it's real bizarre. But the reason I brought it up is to point out that what we have done with video games, we've done before. Time and time again. Adults are scared by whatever kind of media their kids consume. Now, I'm not saying that media can't be damaging. They can, but no form of media is inherently more damaging than any other. Specifically, when it comes to social issues, some media definitely can be damaging. But just like comic books, there's nothing that makes video games more damaging than any other. And there's definitely not a link between video games and violent crime. Myth number 2. Video games are socially damaging. I mean, they aren't. They're just like, no. Like, gaming has helped me connect with my friends over lockdown when I otherwise wouldn't. And according to studies, gaming is a social activity for a lot of teens. Games like Halo have friends on the same team, while games like Among Us let friends play a bluffing game without being in the same place. About 78% of teens who play games online with friends they know in real life say that they feel closer to said friends because of it. Games are a way of bonding, similar to a ton of hobbies. You can play a game by yourself or with others. It's up to you. A mediocre king once said, "You have it your way." Now, when he said it, he was talking about a piece of cardboard painted to look like meat, but when it comes to video games, it truly applies. If you want to make gaming a social activity, you can, quite easily. The reason that games are so social is because they allow you to connect from a distance, which is incredibly useful. Now, I would continue, but I already did a section on this in my Ode to Video Games video, so go watch that and give me more views if you're interested. See, I even self-promoted my own videos. Myth number 3. Girls don't play games. I'm not saying that sexism isn't a problem in gaming, because it is. It's a problem everywhere. But it's not like girls don't play video games. In fact, in 2020, 41% of US gamers are women. It's not like the hobby isn't unisex. It definitely is. In fact, the only reason why people have the impression that it is a boy hobby is because of marketing. In the 1990s, Nintendo released the NES and decided to put it in the toy section. The problem being, the toy section was divided into pink for girls and blue for boys by this time, meaning Nintendo had to pick a side. And they picked boys. Since then, ads have just added to the stigma that games are for boys. Yes, you heard that right. It's rant time. Anyone who's talked to me for more than a minute is very familiar with this. See, if you think about it, the idea that games are intrinsically more for boys is silly, stupid, and bamboozling. Much like many of these myths, it's not your fault if you think this. There have been tons of ad campaigns that try to paint video games as the American boy's handy book of hobbies, but it's important to remember there's no quality intrinsic to video games that make them more for boys than girls. People tend to think that video games make monsters, that they turn a teen into someone without a social life. They are, by nature, not something we should appreciate. But, you know, video games aren't a terrifying beast that will turn your children into Henry Bowers. Clowns do that. Video games are not the enemy. Clowns are. Okay? Rant time over. Let's just move on to the next myth. Myth number 4. Video games are just entertainment. Okay, apparently rant time's not over. See, there are morons who believe this, and these people are stupid. You know how I said that if you believe these myths, it's not your fault. But that doesn't apply with this one. This one, it's your fault. You know, video games are an art form. I'm not here to talk about that. They are. I don't want to read your think piece. I don't care if someone laughed out loud while reading it. I don't care. This is not a conversation we need to have. Video games are art. Just like how paintings, sculpting, and film are all art forms, video games are that too. Meaning that while some video games may just be entertainment, they definitely are not all that. I'd say that any game with a story isn't just entertainment. Because when something has a story, part of its purpose is telling that story. Even if it's done poorly, or even if the story's terrible, or if it's even just a semblance of a story, it doesn't matter. It's not just entertainment at that point. Also, excusing video games as just entertainment is stupid. Doing that ignores the lessons video games can teach. And doing that is also foolish because they are engaging and a great way of teaching kids valuable lessons. They can teach kids about kindness, empathy, why choices matter, or if you play Cuphead, maybe playing craps with the devil isn't the best idea. If I didn't know that, could you even imagine what might have happened? I might have been forced to very rarely make videos in an attempt to convince people to join my video game-based cult. Imagine how unfortunate that would be. The history of gaming being made the enemy. Now, this isn't really a myth, but that's just a loose format I was barely following in the first place, so, it's interesting and I want to talk about it. If you think that video games being constantly criticized for stupid reasons is a recent thing, you're wrong. In fact, it's been happening ever since 1976. In 1976, the game Death Race was pulled off the shelves because it caused a moral panic. The game was a simple arcade thing in which you ran over gremlins in order to get points. The graphics aren't violent, but people made the claim that the title promoted violence. People called it gross and sick because seemingly it taught people how to hit and kill pedestrians. It was protested to the point that only 1,000 Death Race cabinets were made. Another example comes in 1992. A game was released, a game you might have heard of. The Addams Family for the Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis, and also Mortal Kombat. Now, despite the fact I would love to spend the rest of this video analyzing the Addams Family game, and I promise one day I will make a video on it, but a lot of people got mad because of Mortal Kombat, and that's kind of the point of the video. So, you see, Mortal Kombat was the first game to feature lifelike violence, and because of that, it caused a huge amount of moral outrage. So much that the co-founder of the company that made Mortal Kombat was told to change the blood to green. There was even a congressional hearing about it. There are tons of examples that show people panicking because a video game is too violent. The fact is, the panic isn't justified, or at least it almost never is. But when you're told by people like the president, the anchors on your local news channel, and politicians on both sides of the aisle, you might have a sense of panic, even if the facts aren't on your side. If you hear the same thing from everyone, it's easy to believe that thing. The fact is that video games don't cause violence. They aren't the problem, but censoring video games is easier than actual change. So people push this narrative. All we can do is question those ideas. Thanks for watching. I know it's been a while, but making videos is hard, and I'm lazy. Mostly it's the fact that I'm lazy, but I still very much appreciate you watching.